All right, Rabbi, good morning. Let us begin. Eshkayach to the Chazara Seder Chavura. So beautiful. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share, to thank our annual TALMUD Torah sponsor, the Tilson Mishpacha, for dedicating all the Sherman Droshos this year as a zechus for besuros tovos for Am Yisroel. Our TALMUD Torah sponsors for the month of Nissan, Haba Alinu L'Tova, Paul Pollack, in celebration of the Nissan birthdays of his wife Kathy and his granddaughter Tikveh, Esther Pollack. Our anonymous TALMUD Torah sponsor, the zechus of simchos for all of our children, and for Nissan to be the month of geula, sheleima for Klal Yisroel. And Avraham Shaindy Kelman in memory of Avram's mother, Sara Braina bas Yehoshua Heschel, Zechariah. Our week of learning sponsors, Paul and Kathy Pollack, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Paul's father, Shmuel ben Zechariah, and great-grandmother, Tziril bas Reb Dov. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, the families in Nechama, all of those who need a refuah shavan together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. This bracha Hashem bring home all of our hostages, and our holy soldiers should be successful. B'chol maaseh yadehem. Because with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, really a lot to do today. Baruch Hashem. Today's daf is Kuf Zayin 107. We are picking up on 106b, Kuf Vav Amud Beis, and we are picking up 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lines down from the top. Amali Mar Bar Ravina. Read it goes quickly. Amar Mar Bar Ravina Lebrei. So Mar Bar Ravina said to his son, "B'kula lo tafish l'midrash l'bar mibilam arasha." In general, don't spend time dashing negative things about Rishoyim. Don't do that. Don't do that. Again, I will say in general, what Chazal are almost saying is, it's not a healthy exercise to try to find fault in people, even in bad people. Just not a good thing. The exception to this rule is Bilam. Why? The Gemara said, the more negative you find about him, go ahead and dash it. Now, I will say, the difference over here is that with Bilam itself, there's so much text to support this negative narrative. There's so many other supporting stories to support this negative approach. So it's fascinating. So with Bilam, you can dash in as much negativity as you want, but with other Rishaim, even Rishaim, don't go ahead and spend too much time, espousing or delving into their negative traits. Not a healthy exercise, not a good use of time to find the fault in people. Ksiv, Doeg. So now we're going to focus a little bit on Doeg. Remember again, Doeg had Yomi. We've spoken about him extensively, but now we're going to get into his story. Doeg was an advisor to Shaul. Let me just take a step back. Doeg's major event, for which he is essentially lost his olam haba, and for which he really is, in this list of negative personalities, is David HaMelech is on the run from Shaul. He goes ahead and he seeks shelter in the city of Nov Yarkonim. Now again, Nov has no idea what is going on between David and Shaul. Most of the people don't know what's happening between David and Shaul. So David comes to Nov and he goes ahead and he asks for two things. What are the two things? Food and weaponry. Nov was a city of Kohanim. Now remember again, circle back. The Gemara says, false Yonasan for not going ahead and giving him food and sending him away. So he comes to Nov, he asks for food and weaponry. Nov gives it to him. And he tells them, I'm on a secret mission from the king, from Shaul. Nov gives it to him, of course, right? Understandably so. And then what ends up happening? Is Doeg tells Nov, by the way, Doeg tells Shaul, Nov is aiding and abetting your son-in-law, right? Who's a fugitive. Shaul wipes out the entire city of Nov. One person escapes, but he goes ahead and he wipes out the city of Nov. This was the event that really almost sealed the fate of Shaul, sealed the fate of Doeg, and all of this is happening. And again, Doeg was doing this really he didn't believe it. It was to cement his own hold on power. So the Gemara says as follows. So now that's Doeg. So ksiv Doeg, ksiv Doeg. So which is the name? So also in the beginning, before Doeg did what he did, Baruch Hu worried a lot about Doeg. In a family, sometimes a parent, every child is different. Sometimes a parent looks at one of his kids and he's especially worried about one of his children. He feels like that child is maybe more susceptible to other influences. That child is more susceptible to other things that may be going on. So Baruch Hu worried about Doeg. Here, he always worried about Doeg. That was Doeg going to go ahead and make the wrong life decisions. But that's lashon of dag or Doeg. But after, unfortunately, again, Doeg kind of left the fold and really did some really terrible things. Amar vai sheyatza zeh. Oy, look what he has done. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, my tichsev, matis halal b'ra hagibar, chesed kel kol hayom. Amar Chodesh Baruch Hu, Chodesh Baruch Hu said to Doeg, what are you doing? Lo gibar b'Torah ata? Aren't you strong in Torah? In other words, as Doeg was sinning, the Ribbon Shalom Kiviyachal says to him, what is the matter with you, Doeg? You're better than this. You can do better than this. Aren't you a gibar b'Torah? Aren't you strong in Torah? Mat tishala b'ra. What benefit will you have from all of this negative behavior? Lo chesed kel natu elecha kol hayom. Have I not shown you favor? Or do I not literally give you favor? The entire book says it's a tremendous musar. Almost as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Kiviyachal pained by what Doeg is doing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Doeg, you have everything going for you. You have Torah. You have me in your corner. Anything and everything you want in life, you have. Why engage in this behavior? Overwhelming. Hashem said to Doeg Rasha, Parashas Mesapre Lashon Hara Ma'ata Dorish Bohem. This is incredible. It's like, when Kadosh Baruch Hu said to Doeg, when you get up to the section regarding bloodshed, or prohibition of bloodshed, or you get up to the section of Lashon Hara, how are you going to interpret those sections? Doeg was a big Talmud Chacham. So ultimately, again, Kadosh Baruch Hu says to him, what are you going to do when you get up to these sections in Torah, knowing that your life is not in consonance with these sections? Jerusalem is a tremendous musar, I think, for us as well. We all have areas of our lives that are not exactly in conformance with Torah. And when we go ahead and we get to those sections in Torah, how exactly do we read through them, right? How exactly do we darshan them? Knowing, we all have this, knowing that our lives are not exactly in sync with what it is that we're learning. Doeg's Torah was only from the lips outwards. In other words, what was Doeg's problem? This is really profound. What was Doeg's ultimate issue? He did not internalize his Torah. He didn't internalize. His Torah was a pursuit. He was a tremendous Talmud Chacham, but at the end of the day, it was never internalized. So in the beginning, people feared Doeg. In the end, they mocked him. He lost his stand. So this is actually an interesting pasuk. It literally means he swallowed a treasure and then vomited it out. Mibitno yorishenu kel. Amar Dov Nechash Baruch Hu. Listen to this. Ribono Shalom Yamos Doeg. So Kadosh Baruch Hu says, David HaMelech says to Kadosh Baruch Hu, please take Doeg's life. Please take his life. Right? Kadosh Baruch Hu is like, David HaMelech is done. Take his life. Amar lo chel bala. So ultimately again, v'yakienu. So Kadosh Baruch Hu says, here's the problem. Doeg has a lot of Torah. I can't kill him now. Wait till he forgets his Torah. Once he forgets his Torah, then I can go ahead and take his life. Amar the father of David HaMelech says, "Mibitno Yerushenu kel." Just take his Torah now. Which Rabbi say, by the way, is something so fascinating that the Ribono Shel Olam Kiviyachol says to David, I can't do anything to Doeg because his Torah protects him. Rabbi say, isn't this incredible? Doeg was a murderer. Right? Doeg was not a good guy. Doeg, again, the Mishnah says, doesn't have a chelik in Olam Haba. But yet the Ribono Shel Olam says, Torah is so powerful. We know the Chazal tell us this. Torah is migna umatzla. It goes ahead and protects and it saves. So Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I know what I have to do to Doeg, but I can't do anything to him until he forgets his Torah. To which David responds, make him forget his Torah. Just make him forget his Torah. We'll say the power of the Torah that we learn, the power for it to sustain us, the power for it to save us, the power for it to protect us is overwhelming. This is wild. We'll say first wide line. Kadosh Baruch Hu says to David, it's crazy that Hashem is having these conversations with David HaMelech. So Hashem says to David, let Doeg come into the world to come. Right? Allow. What was he hear this? Like Hashem is asking David HaMelech's permission to allow Doeg to enter into Olam Haba. Amar Lefanav, Gam Ayitis Chalanes. David says, no, let him be uprooted forever. Mai Dichsib, Yachtecha, V'yasecha, Me'ol V'sharshecha Me'aretz Chaim Sel. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu David, Shmaita Be Midrashav, Mishmei, David, okay, if you're not going to let him into Olam Haba, at least let it be. Doeg was a tremendous Talmud Chacham. Let it be that they relate Torah teachings in his name in the base Medrash. Amar Lefanav, Yechatzcha v'Yisachcha me'ohel. Let him be uprooted from the tent, representing the tent of Torah. Rabbi says, no. Lehavi le'benin rabbanon. So ultimately, let him at least have offspring who are rabbanon, tamidei chachamim. To which the Gemara says, let his roots be uprooted from the earth forever. David said, no. In other words, we'll say, which is so fascinating, David HaMelech is filled with this righteous anger towards Doeg. And essentially, David HaMelech felt, and remembering, we'll talk about David HaMelech, was the consummate Baal Tshuva. David HaMelech understood the power of Tshuva. What was the problem? Doeg didn't do it. Doeg didn't do Tshuva. So again, you can't, in other words, we'll say, we're going to see with this today's sugya, almost anything is forgivable, right? Almost any mistake that I make with HaKadosh Baruch Hu can be worked out, as long as I'm willing to engage in the process. If I'm unwilling to own my part, if I'm unwilling to accept responsibility, if I'm unwilling to go ahead and take it, that it's my job to fix it, then nothing can get fixed. The tragedy of Doeg is only partly in what he did. The tragedy is compounded by his unwillingness to do the real personalistic work to fix it. So the Rambam says, if he's not going to fix it, there's no olam haba for him, there's no future for him, and there's no teaching in the base medrashim. Incredible. Ayeh sofer, ayeh shokel, ayeh sofer samigdalim. So we'll say, so literally translated, it means, where is the scribe, where is the measurer, where is the one who counts towers? Now what does this mean? So the Gemara says, ayeh sofer kol osio shevet Torah. So this is all a reference to Doeg. Right? What happened to the one who could count all of the letters in the Torah? Ayeh shokel, sheshokel kol kalim v'chamurim shevet Torah. Where is the one who could literally again weigh all of the lenient and stringent laws of Torah, representing Doeg's exceptional scholarship? Ayeh sofer samigdalim. Who is the one who goes ahead and counts the towers? What is that? Ayeh sofer shlosh me'os halachos psukos b'migdal haporeach. Doeg knew 300 halachos concerning the floating tower. Haporeach ba'aver. The Bible says, what's the floating tower? So by the way, there's a couple of different interpretations of this. If you take a look at Rashi is on the left-hand column, third line down from the top. Lishnach, you see that? B'migdal haporeach ba'avir hanichnas le'eretz ha'amim b'shida teva u'migdalim hu tameim lo. So we'll say, so this is an interesting halacha. We've actually seen this reference that essentially, don't ask how it happens, but just, how it happens. Person goes into, remember, we're not going to get too into this. There's a general rabbinic prohibition, or there's a general rabbinic law, that Eretz Ha'amim, land outside of Eretz Yisrael, has rabbinic tumah. That's the halacha. So again, generally in Ohel, if you're in a structure, that could be chotzeitz b'fnei hatumah. That could go ahead and create an interposition, a blockage to the tumah. What happens if the Ohel, the migdal, is floating? Right? So again, it's a theoretical question, but what's the implications of that by tumah? So apparently Doeg had 300 halachas associated with that particular unique shayla. That was the precision of his knowledge. Rabbi says, Arba meos bios bo'u doeg v'achitofel b'migdal pareach aver. So this is incredible. So Rava said, no, in fact, Doeg and Achitofel, right, who again, unfortunately, both made terribly wrong decisions. Doeg and Achitofel asked 400 questions in the sugya of the floating tower. So the Gemara says, "V'lo ifshit luhu chad," but they weren't. Not one of them was this. In other words, they asked such good questions, no one was able to answer. Well, say, watch this. Amar Rava. Rava said, "Rabusa l'miboy boy." Is it such a big deal to ask questions? So I'll say this is a profound idea. So essentially, what Rava was saying is like this: Shkach, they ask questions. Well, what would have been even better is to do what? Is to give answers. So I think the other piece that I was saying, I underlined this line, I think this is a tremendous line. Amar Rava, Rabusa, Lemi Boi, is it such godless to ask questions? What Rava is saying is like this: life is filled with questions. Questions are very nice. Feel free to ask them as long as they don't paralyze you. A lot of times in life we ask questions and we can't move forward until we get the answers. And Rava says, the success in life, meaning in life, is not found in the questions. Right? Asking my questions, meaning in life is found in forward movement. Meaning in life is found in growth. Meaning in life is in the ability to not get answers, but still find the ability to go ahead and move yourself forward. Shkoyach, the greatness of, sometimes you think like the guy who asks the precision question, that's godless. That's not godless. You know what godless is? Godless is two things. The person who asks the questions doesn't get answers, still continues forward, and the person who doesn't spend his time asking questions, instead utilizes and marshals his energy to move himself forward. Incredible. Mar weiter. B'shem Rav Yehuda. This is a great Gemara. In the years of Rav Yehuda, Kula Tanuye ben Nezikin. So in the years of Rav Yehuda, everybody was versed in the Seder of Nezikin, right? Like the Babas, where we're in Nezikin now. The Babas, Sanhedrin, Makos, all of those, right? Like tort law, damages, those type of things. So Va'anon kamasninon tuva bo'oktzin. So this is Rava talking, right? So Rava said, Rava's comparing himself, right, his time to Rav Yehuda's time, right? So in Rav Yehuda, right, in the years of Rav Yehuda, pretty much everyone was proficient in one area, specifically again Nezikin. So Rava said, by us Va'anon kamasninon tuva. We learned bo'oktzin. I will say uktzin is a lot of halachos of Tum and Tara. So Rav is pointing out that in his time, they had much greater proficiency in Torah. Rav Yehuda's time, they only had proficiency in nezikin, damages. Rav said, we not only have proficiency in damages, we also have it again in uktzin, so many other areas. Listen to this. Rav says, yet, v'chi havamati Rav Yehuda, so yeah, when they were get up to the sugya again, we're not going to delve into the intricacies over here, but suffice it to say there's an interesting shaila when it comes to tum and tara. If you have a vegetable with a stem, so what's the status of the vegetable vis-a-vis the stem, or what's the status of the stem vis-a-vis the vegetable in terms of tum and tara? When these questions would come up in Rav Yehuda's yeshiva, you know what he would say? Amar havios to Rav Shmuel kachazina hacha. He would say, wow, these are topics to be dealt with by great people like Rav and Shmuel. Rav Yehuda said, above my pay grade. So Rav Yehuda was a great Talmud Chacham, but his knowledge was limited to the area of Nezikin. Right? And when he came to areas of Uktzin, it's just like he would come to it, and say, this is above my pay grade, this is for Rav and Shmuel. And I will say, here's the contrast. Rava said, by us, we were experts in Uktzin. Yet watch this. Va'ana kamasninan ba'uktzin tlas sari mesifta. So Rava said, me, I had 13 yeshivas learning Uktzin. Right? Rav Yehuda didn't know Uktzin. We had 13 yeshivas running Uktzin. And yet, Rav Yehuda shalaf masani va'asamitra. Yet, when there was a drought, all Rav Yehuda had to do was take off his shoe, and it would rain. All he had to do was take off his shoe. Now, Rashi points out, the act of taking off shoes is an act of discomfort, kind of like avelos, an act of discomfort. So as soon as Rav Yehuda removed his shoe as a sign of discomfort that there's a drought, it would begin to rain. Va'ana savchinon v'leka demashkach ban. We cry out, and no one listens to us. So I will say this leads Rava to a fascinating conclusion. Ella, HaKadosh Baruch Hu liba boy. What do you see from here, Abosai? What do you see from here? What you see from here at the end of the day is that it's not the amount of scholarship that impresses God, but it's the amount of heart that you put into whatever it is that you do. Rava may have had more scholarship, right? The times of Rava may have had more scholarship. But apparently Rabbi Yehuda himself had more heart. Now, whatever this means, right? Whatever this means, that Rabbi Yehuda had more heart. But what Rav is trying to highlight over here is that scholarship is not the metric of success when it comes to spirituality. It's heart, it's effort, it's passion, it's commitment. Those are the things that the Ribono Shel Olam values over things. For one simple reason, I will say, scholarship is often tethered to abilities that you don't choose, right? In other words, people process differently, people learn differently, some people absorb information more readily, some people have difficulty doing it, and that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu built us. That's why He programmed us. So it can't be that success is tethered to scholarship if I don't control all of those factors. So therefore, Rava says success in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is determined liba, by your heart. What's your commitment? What's your passion? How much are you vested in your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Am I showing up for that relationship day in and day out? Am I committed even when it's difficult? If I have that, that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu prizes in the realm of spirituality. Absolutely incredible. Dichsiv v'Hashem yir l'leivav. Amram Sharshia. Doeg v'achitovel. Back to Doeg v'achitovel. Doeg v'achitovel. Lo havu savi shmaita. So Doeg and Achitofel never really understood what it was that they were learning. Okay, Maskiv Marzucha, is that possible? Mandich Sibbe, Aye Sofer, Aye Shokel, Aye Sofer Samigdalim, Vat Amad Lahavi Savish Might. What are you talking about? You just said before that Doeg had 300 halachas when it came to the floating tower, right? And now he's saying he didn't understand halacha. It doesn't make any sense. The Gemara says, "Elo to lahava salkaluhu shmaita aliba dehilchasa." What was the problem? The problem was, Rabbi say, they knew a lot of Torah. What weren't they able to get to? Halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa. They weren't able to say, what does it mean they were able to get to halacha l'maisa? So it could be literal that they weren't able to get to halacha l'maisa because the Gemara says, Dichsiv, because after all the pasuk says, Sod Hashem li'yireyav. The secrets of Hashem are known to only those who fear Him. In this context, the Gemara says Sod means the foundation. Like Tzadik Yisod Olam. The foundation is halacha. There you need siyata d'shmaya in order to be able to arrive at exactly what to do. They didn't have, so they had great scholarship, did not have halacha l'mayis because they didn't have the siyata d'shmaya. What it could also mean is, when we talk about the ability to, or the fact that they didn't have halacha l'mayisa, what that could also mean is, what's halacha l'maysa? Halacha l'maysa is the ability to take what you learn and to implement it into what you live. What or how you live. What was the mistake of Doeg and Achitofel? They were great scholars, great Talmidei Chachamim. But apparently the problem was they were unable to take what they learned and plug it into how they lived. They didn't allow their Torah to shape their lives. And I both say, a lot of times we live with this kind of cognitive dissonance where I'm learning, and I'm acquiring a lot of tremendous information, and I know what to do. The problem just is I don't always do it, right? It's the nature of our lives. So that's what it means also that I'm learning, but I'm not learning aliba dehilchasa, right? I'm not learning halacha l'maisa because my learning is my learning, but it's not translating into the way that I live. Incredible. Doeg only died once he forgot his Torah. Shneimar, hu yamos be'ein mosorovi valto yishna. Rav Ashi Amar nitztara. Rav Ashi says Doeg contracted saras. Shneimar hitzmeisa kolzona mimach. Uksiv hasam letzmisos. Umetargamina lechalutin. Okay. Utanan ein bein muskar lemuchlat. Again, there's no distinction between a mesora muskar and muchlat. Muskar means a mesora is kind of in not seclusion. What's the word? Isolation. Right? Who's in isolation, waiting to see what his saras is going to be. And a muchlat is a confirmed mitzorah, ela priya uprima, allowing his hair to grow and his clothing to be torn. Rabbi Yochanan, there were 3 destructive angels who were summoned to Doeg. What did they do? Echad sheshichech tamudo. One malach caused Doeg to forget his learning. Ve'echad shesaraf nishmaso. One burnt his neshama. Ve'echad shepizer afro b'batei knesios u'batei midrashos. And one scattered his ashes in shuls and batei medrash. Incredible. I want to point out how interesting it is, right? That you see, it's fascinating just how there's so many different streams of thought in Chazal. It's hard to keep track of all these things because we're moving so quickly. Remember how we started today's daf, which was really yesterday's daf, but we're doing it today. So remember again, Marbrei Ravina said to his son, don't spend too much time speaking about the negative traits of Rishonim, right? And yet, what are we doing? Right? We're talking all about, right, the negative things. So it's just interesting how, again, it's almost as if there's one school of thought that says, okay, Rishon are bad, let HaKadosh Baruch Hu take care of them. Our job is not to focus on the negativity of individuals. That's one stream of thought. The other stream of thought is, no, it's really important to learn about Rishonim. Why is it important to learn about Rishonim? The same way that we like to read about biographies of Gedolim, because we can learn how to live. Sometimes from Rishonim we also learn what not to do as well. And we see that even great people can make catastrophic mistakes that undoes all of their greatness. So the Gemara goes weiter. Rabbi Yochanan, Doeg v'Achitofel lo ra'u zeh zeh. Doeg and Achitofel did not know each other. They didn't know each other. After all, Doeg b'mei Shaul, v'Achitofel b'mei David, which makes sense. Doeg lived in the days of Shaul, and Achitofel lived in the days of David. Now, again, that's not such a stretch to say that they would have known each other. What's important to recognize is, don't remember again, so Doeg was before David became king, and Achitofel was David's advisor during the rebellion of Avshalom. So there's a couple of decades separating them. Even though they could have overlapped, the Gemara says they didn't know each other. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan, Doeg v'Achitofel lo chatzu yimehem. Furthermore, Doeg and Achitofel did not live past the age of 35. The Gemara says, this goes back to yesterday's daf as well. Tanyin HaMelchir Bryce that supports this. It literally means they did not live out up to half of their days. That supports us. We had this pasuk yesterday, right? When you remember again, the min asked Rabbi Hanina, right? Rabbi Hanina, how old was Bilam when he died? And Rabbi Hanina said, I don't know, but he quoted this exact pasuk, right? Where the pasuk says, Anshe damo mirma lo yechetzu yimeim. Literally again, people who spill blood, people who are deceitful, lo yechetzu yimeim, will not live to half of their lifespan. Kol shnosav shel doeg lo hayu. So again, I will say we operate with the understanding that a lifespan is 70 years. So if Chazal say that a Rosh is not living to up to half of his lifespan, that means he's not living to 35. Elo shloshim va'arba v'shal Achitofel einon elo shloshim v'shalosh. Doeg lived to 34, Achitofel lived to 33. From Rabbi Yochanan, B'tchila, I will say, by the way, which I just want to point out something amazing. Just, especially when you look through the lens of the scholarship of Doeg and Achitofel, that they were so young, yet they were outstanding scholars. So again, it's just fascinating. To me, these personalities are fascinating because clearly these were people who were capable of such overwhelming greatness and such profound accomplishment. Look the amount of Torah they amassed in such a short amount of time, yet these debilitating life failures. Overwhelming. In the beginning, David called Achitofel his Rebbe. Then he called him his friend. And then he called him his student. In other words, Achitophel's stature was downgraded over time. Together. We'll go ahead and explore the secrets. Top of Kovzayin, Ochel Lachni, Higdel Alai Akev. Amrav Yehuda, Amrav, Liolam. Both say, get ready for this Gemara. Get ready for this Gemara. This is absolutely amazing. So Amrav Yehuda, this was my little teaser in the chat yesterday, if you read it. Amrav Yehuda, Amrav, Liolam, Al Yavi Adam Atzal Dini Sar. Wow, here we go, we're saying. A person should never bring themselves to a point of being tested. Don't put yourself, a person should not bring himself to be tested. I will say, I just want to point out, even before we go on with this, actually, let's finish the story. Shari David Melech Yisrael, Hevi Asmel Dini Yisrael, V'nichshal. David HaMelech willingly put himself into a situation of being tested, of testing his spiritual resolve, and he failed. What's the story? Here we go. Amar Lefan of Ribono Shalom, Mipnei Ma Omrim, Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, Ve'ein Omrim Elokei David. Wow. So we'll say this is the Shaila. David HaMelech says, why is when we dive in, we say Elokei Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, but we don't say Elokei David. I want to point out, this is not Gaiva. You understand what's happening over here. This is David HaMelech saying, I want to self-actualize. I want to become the best version of me. I feel that I have the potential to maximize my greatness. How do I get myself to a point where you, in other words, we'll say, what's the chap of Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov? What's the chap of that? The Ribono Shel Olam is willing to associate his name with those people. That's a big thing. That's a big thing. Baruch Hu literally again attaches his name to Avram Yitzchak. So David HaMelech is saying, how do I get to the level where you will attach your name to me? How does that happen? So David HaMelech says, well, it's very simple. Amar Inhu minsi, ihu minsili, va'atlo minsisli. Baruch Hu, listen, David, they were tested by me. Each of them were tested, and they succeeded. So when a Yid is able to go out and be tested in life and able to overcome his tests and challenges, that's when I associate my name with him. Amar the father of Ribono Shel Olam, bechaneni v'naseni. Shneimar, bechaneni Hashem v'naseni. David says, bring it on. Not an exact quote, but you understand, right? Test me. Right? Test me. I'm ready for it. I'm ready. Okay, I got it. It makes total sense. How can you know who I really am until you test my resolve? So test me. Amar, so Baruch Hu says, now it's very important to understand that Ribono Shel Olam did not give David this test. David asked for it. We'll see why this is important later on. Amar, min sina lecha va'avidna milsa ba'adach. So I'm going to test you, but here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to give you an advantage that I did not give to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. How so? So again, Hashem says to David, I'm going to give you an advantage. What's the advantage? The advantage is the avos, I never told them I was testing them beforehand. You, I'm telling you I'm going to test you, and I'm also telling you how I'm going to test you. I'm testing you in a matter of morality. Dvar erva. Now, Bosai, just so you understand what's happening over here. The fact that the Rebbe Shalom is telling David that he's going to test him, and telling him how he's going to test him, tells us what? The Rebbe Shalom doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to do it. So he's trying to give David as many advantages as possible. But the Rebbe Shalom feels that this is a bad idea. But again, David, you're pushing for it. I'll give Shlomo say in general, kind of a little bit like a parent. A parent wants to give good hadracha, but at a certain point in time, such as the child gets older, even if the parent knows it's a bad idea, right? The parent has to give the child that autonomy. Shlomo was to say to David, there's a reason I didn't bring the test upon you. There's a reason I'm not doing this on my own. You're pushing. Okay, I can't. It wouldn't be healthy for me to stand in the way of this nisayon if this is something you want to bring upon yourself. So I'll try to help you be successful to the best of your ability. I'm telling you, I'm testing you. I'm telling you, dvar erva. Miyad, listen to this. Vayhila esa erev. It was in the evening. Vayacham David me'al mishkavo. David got up from his bed. The boss say now, the pasuk doesn't make sense, right? Why doesn't the pasuk make sense? Why is David getting up at night? Right? After all, again, you go to sleep at night. Why is he going up at night? So it's fascinating. Rabbi Yehuda, shahafach mishkaval shalayla lemishkaval shalyom. Literally, again, he switched around his schedule, right? His bed schedule from night to day. Rashi points out, what did David HaMelech do? David HaMelech had relations with his wife that day, during the day. Why? Because now David HaMelech is forewarned. He says, I'm going to be tested with a matter of immorality or morality. So what does he do? He has relations with his wife, hoping that'll satisfy that desire, and therefore, again, he won't be tempted by anything else. Okay, good plan. We'll say this is wild. And he forgot the halacha. What's the halacha, Rabbi say? Eiver katan yesh ba'adam. There is a small part of man's body. Right? A reference ultimately, again, to the makom mila. Small part of man's body. The Gemara says, listen to this. Masbio raiv. If you satiate it, it's always hungry. Umar ivo sabeya. But if you starve it, it becomes satiated. What does that mean? I will say, this is incredible. So the way it works with this desire for sexuality is, the more you have it, the more you want it. The less you have it, and by the way, what less means is, the more moderated it is, the more one is able to curb that appetite. By the way, this is not unique here, right? This is the Ramban on Kedoshim Tiyu, right? What does the Ramban say? What does it mean to be holy? Kadesh es atzmecha b'masha mutralach. Moderation. Kedusha is all about moderation. Overindulgence just yields a gluttonous type of life approach, where you just want more and more and more and more. And even if it's permitted gluttony as a midah only gets a person into trouble. Moderation helps a person curb appetites in the right way. That's why, again, we know that in Yiddishkeit, again, there's tremendous holiness and importance that is attached to sexuality. But it has to happen in a framework. There's a mitzvah of owner, right? A man has obligations towards his wife. There's a frequency that has to occur. But if there's an overindulgence, the problem that happens is the appetite gets out of control. By the way, the crazy part is, even if the overindulgence is done in a permitted way, right? Not talking about with other women. If with one's own wife, there's an overindulgence, then by definition, things just get out of hand. So interestingly enough, this was fascinating. David HaMelech tries to curb the appetite, but yet Chazal seemed to feel that the way that he did it represented a sense of overindulgence, so it backfired. And so not only did it not curb the appetite, but what? It enhanced it. Overwhelming. What happens? So David HaMelech is out, right? He's on the rooftop. Right? Walking on the rooftop. He sees a woman bathing on the rooftop next to the palace. And she was a beautiful woman. Batsheva hava kachaifa reshe tuse chalsa. So what does this mean? First of all, okay, so it's Batsheva who's bathing on the rooftop. Now, first of all, what does that mean? Batsheva is just like bathing in public over here on the rooftop. I mean, it's not public, but on the rooftop doesn't make any sense. Somebody says, no. Batsheva was shampooing her hair. Kachaifa reshe, she was washing her hair. Tuse chalsa, underneath like a curtain. like a curtain. Chalsa, Rashi says literally mean like a dome. Like a dome. She had whatever. She had like a shower curtain. She had something that was there, right? She had a curtain protecting her privacy. Asa Satan idmila kitzipirta. So ultimately, again, what happens? The Satan appeared like a bird. Pasak be gira. Pasak. What happens? So there was a bird. David HaMelech took out his bow and arrow and he shot at the bird. What happened? Paska lechalsa. So he might probably miss the bird, but he pierced the curtain. As a result, igla v'chazye. He saw Bathsheba bathing. So the Gemara says, Miyad vayishtach David vayidrosh leisha. Immediately, again, I will say, by the way, there's so many crazy things about this story. First of all, I'll say, what's even troublesome about this story? Why is David HaMelech shooting arrows at birds? Right? As a kid, he also took a magnifying glass to ants. What is that? First of all, Jews don't even do that, right? No to be Yehuda, right? Jews hunt for food. Jews don't hunt for sport. You don't shoot arrows at birds. That's what I'm saying. See, you know what the most incredible thing is? I know, this is very important, so listen. The Ribono Shel Olam knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. And so he knows where to give a test, and he knows where not to give a test. And he knows what we can handle, and he knows what we're not yet ready to handle. There are so many crazy parts about this story, and every single part has an unintended negative consequence. So David HaMelech seeks to satiate that sexual appetite in a permitted way by being with his wife during the day. The problem is that was maybe a little bit of overindulgence and therefore backfired. He's spaziering on the rooftop. I want to point out to you, David HaMelech, Maseches Brachos, David HaMelech wasted absolutely no time. He wasted no time. The Gemara goes through his schedule. Right? He woke up at chatzos every day. Right? So, what's happening over here? He's just strolling. David HaMelech is not a stroller. That didn't make sense. You know what I'm saying? David HaMelech he's not the guy who just walks around. That's not David. This is David Malka Mashiach. There's so many things about, and now shooting an arrow at a bird. Who does that? What's going on over here? So again, we'll see everything for CS. So he sees Bathsheba, obviously tremendously aroused by Bathsheba. Vayishlach David vayidrosh leisha vayomer halo zos Bathsheba bas Eliam eshes Uriah Hiti. This is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah Hiti. Vayishlach David malochem veikachel. David HaMelech sent for her, had her brought to the palace. Vatavo elav vayishkav ima. He has relations with her, right? He sleeps with her. Ultimately, again, now. Also, what's interesting is the Gemara says she wasn't a nida. She wasn't the nida, which, by the way, Chazal also understands over here something very interesting, which was that was the bathing, right? That was the chafifa. She was actually preparing herself for the mikvah, right? That evening that David HaMelech saw her. So that's what it means when it says he miskadesh es mitumasa. V'aynu dichsiv. And this is what's meant when it says Bachanta libi pakarata laila tzraftani baltim. So again, so David HaMelech says literally, Chosh Baruch Hu, you checked my heart, right? You checked my heart, and ultimately, again, you are unable to find purity. Zamosi bal ya'avar pi. David HaMelech says literally, what does it mean Zamosi bal ya'avar pi? First white line, Amar echo zamama nafal bepume deman desanili velo amar ki hamilsa. If only someone had muzzled me when I had this conversation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I would have never asked for this test. But we've all had those moments where we wished someone was there to muzzle us. So that would have been something that I would not have said or not have done. David HaMelech regrets very much, obviously, this entire situation. Dar Shrava, Mai Dichsiv, Lam Natzech LeDavid Ba'Hashem Chasisi, Eich Tomru L'Nafshi, Nudi Harchem Tzipor. So we'll say, I want to point out something amazing. So first of all, just so you understand, right, the rest of this story. The event with Bathsheba forever changed David HaMelech's life, right? This was one of those crossroad events that forever changed the trajectory, and we're going to talk over here about the fallout from this episode with Bathsheba. But we'll say, most decisions we make in life, they have repercussions, ramifications, not necessarily for the rest of our lives. Then there are certain times that you're at a crossroads in life, and if you go right and if you go left, your life turns out dramatically different. For David HaMelech, that night was one of those pivotal moments. One of those tremendously pivotal moments, and his life forever changed. Now, David HaMelech is going to teach us, David was the consummate Baal Tshuva, but his life forever changes after that fateful night. Before we go on, I will say, The other piece we have to also understand is what's the takeaway message from this? This is how the Gemara starts, right? Rabbi says in the name of Rav, Li'olam al yavi adam asmo lidei nisayon. Don't put yourself in complicated and complicating situations. I will say, how many times in life do we put ourselves in circumstances that I know are not spiritually correct? Whether it's being around people who I know have a negative effect, right? Whether it's engaging in activities that I know are not really good for my neshama. Maybe they're not overtly sinful, but I know they're not good. But I convince myself it's okay. It won't have an effect on me. And that's true until it does. It does. And then I'm like shocked. I can't believe, why am I shocked? Why am I shocked? I will say, so much of life, right? So much of life is preventative spiritual medicine. Right? It's not being reactive. It's not being reactive. It's being proactive. It's identifying the potentially complicating situations in life and not allowing myself to be thrust into them to begin with. A lot of times I can't choose it, but a lot of times I willingly put myself in compromised situations, thinking A, that I'll overcome it, and B, that it won't affect me. And then I succumb to it, and it impacts me, and then I'm shocked. Why am I shocked? Why am I shocked? So much of life is being Ras and Olad, being able to see the impact that certain people, that certain circumstances, that certain events, that certain forms of exposure will have upon me, and don't put myself there to begin with. Avoid it at all costs. Don't put yourself a makom nisayon, because even great people fail when faced with temptation. Overwhelming. Let's go weiter. Second wide line. Right, Lamatziach, the conductor. Again, we'll talk more about that later. So, Ba'Hashem chasisi, I put my faith in Hashem. How could I say to my soul that literally the mountain was moved by a bird? Now, by the way, when you understand so much, I just want to point out also, Sefer Tehillim is like the diary of David HaMelech. Right? So much of Sefer Tehillim represents events that happened in David's life. When you understand these Gemaras, you understand Tehillim. So David HaMelech says, Amr David l'Tnei Baruch Ribbon Shal Machal Liyah Osa Avon. Forgive me for this sin. Shalo Yomru Har Shebachem Sipor Nadadaso. People shouldn't say that the Har Shebachem, the mountain amongst you, who's the mountain? David HaMelech is the mountain. The king is the mountain. The mountain was moved by a bird. What's the bird? The bird is in the story, the Satan. Right? The mountain was moved by the bird. Dar Shrava Mai Dechsev, L'chol Avadcha Chatasi, V'hara Be'inecha Sisi, L'man Titztak B'davrecha Tiske B'shavtecha. Amar David HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, Galya V'yadia Kamecha Di Boile Machbei Yitzrei Havi Kaifine. So the Bible said, this is a wild Gemara. David says, Hashem, you know that if I wanted to overcome my Yitzhahara, I could have done it. I could have done it. So why didn't I? Ella Amina, Delo Lemru, Avda Zaki Lemare. But I didn't want to say that the servant bested the master. So let's say a very strange Gemara. Then I was like, all right, if I could have overcome it, I would have, but then it would have made you look bad, God, right? Because you didn't give me the test because you didn't think I could pass it, and then I would have bested you. And what does this mean? What does this mean? So obviously a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but what David HaMelech is recognizing, I will say, is something amazing. The great part about David HaMelech, and the reason why David HaMelech becomes like the consummate or the paradigmatic Baal Tshuva, is David HaMelech owned it. What does he acknowledge in this moment? That night on the rooftop, if I wanted to resist the temptation, I could have. The one thing I won't pretend is that I was powerless. I was overcome by desire, absolutely overcome by desire, and it was strong. It was absolutely strong. But at the end of the day, I could have said no. I could have slammed on the brakes. And I will say, sometimes the pathway, the first step in tshuva is an ownership of sin, an ownership of mistake. We spend so much time and so much effort deflecting why it's everyone else's fault. But the only way to become a true Baal Tshuva is to own the mistakes in life, as difficult and as painful as it is. I got it. I could have said, as much as I was overwhelmed by desire, if I wanted to stop, I could have stopped. Incredible. Dar Shrava Mai Dechsev, Ki ani letzela nachono machlavi negdi samid. Is incredible. We'll say, Ruya Haisav Batsheva Bas Aliyah David Mishesh Snei Bereshis. We'll say, now let's be clear on something. And this is the fascinating part of this story. David and Bathsheba were meant for each other. They were bashert. The Gemara says ultimately again, they were meant for each other from the beginning of time. Ella sheba eilav b'machov. But what ended up happening is they came together through difficulty and pain. Through difficulty and pain. So ultimately, again, Bathsheba and David were meant for each other. We're meant for each other from the beginning of time. But rather, what happened? The relationship began before it was ripe. It was like eating unripened fruit. Now, let's say, by the way, I just want to point out, how do you know that David and Bathsheba were meant for each other? How do you know that this union was ultimately blessed by God? How do you know it? Shlomo. Right? Their son was Shlomo. Their first child dies. That was part of the punishment of David for David and Bathsheba, for David. Right? Ultimately, again, their son was Shlomo. Shlomo built the Beis Hamikdash. God himself names Shlomo Yedidya, the one who is beloved by God. So that's how we know the union was correct. It was how it came about that was fundamentally flawed. Darash Rava, my Tichsiv, Ubisali Samchu V'nesu Nesu Alenechem, V'lo Yadati, Karo V'lo Damu, Amr Dov Nechash Baruch Moshe, listen, this was incredible. Now, the Gemara is focusing on that last phrase, Karo V'lo Damu. If you tear me, I will not bleed. Right? If you tear it and there is no blood. So, Amr Dov Nechash Baruch Moshe, Olam, Galev Yadol Lefanecha, Shim Hayu Korin Bisari. So David Melech says, you know that if they were to tear my flesh, so the Gemara says, Lo hayu dami shoses, I would not bleed. In other words, David Melech says, I've been so humiliated over this sin of Bathsheba. So we're going to talk about this. I have been so humiliated from the sin of Bathsheba that literally, again, if you prick me, I will not bleed. Right? In other words, that even if they were to cut me, in other words, so the humiliation is highlighted by like this, like a draining of blood. We'll say this is wild. This is wild. You know, David says, when I'm in the Beis Medrash, right, and they're learning about the halachos concerning Daled Misos, death penalties, so they taunt me. Poskim b'mishnas and va'omrim lo David. Habal ishes ish misaso b'ma. What says you have to understand something. The sin of Bathsheba became public knowledge. David HaMelech was humiliated, and David HaMelech was taunted. He was taunted. So literally, again, he'd be in the Beis Medrash, and the Talmidei Chacham in the Beis Medrash would taunt and say, "Oh, David, by the way, what is that? What is the punishment for someone who commits adultery? What's the punishment for that?" Amarti lohem haba ishes ish misaso b'chenek v'yesh lachelik lohem haba. The punishment for one who commits adultery is chenek, strangulation, but he has a portion of the world to come. But chevra, just know, but someone who embarrasses his friend has no chelik in the world to come. So we'll say, and this is what David. So again, I want to just point out, in addition to all the external enemies, right, all of the wars, all the hostile neighbors that Eretz Yisrael had, David HaMelech is taunted and humiliated and degraded within his own kingdom. This was the fallout from the episode of Bathsheba. So this is very interesting. Even now, we're going to see, by the way, there were three different punishments that David received for the sin of Bathsheba. Really four. The loss of their child, illness, loss of their child, illness, and rebellion from within his household. So when David HaMelech was sick, the Gemara says, even when he was sick, Kiyem Shmona Asar Onos. He went ahead and he maintained his conjugal obligations to all of his wives. Shneimar Yagati Ban Chasi Eschabecha Laila Mitasi B'Dimaasi Arsi Amsa. So I'll say, so this is quite fascinating. What is this? First of all, by the way, what's fascinating is how the Gemara goes ahead and darshans this pasuk, right? Yagati ban chasi, literally again, I cried out in my pain. Escha b'chalayla mitasi, b'dimasi arsi amsa. Literally again, I soiled my bed. The Gemara's understanding over here is a reference to relations. So that I'm not saying, even when I was sick, I maintained my obligation to have relations with my wives. So I'll say, what does this mean? Part of the fallout with the episode of Bathsheba is that David HaMelech had other wives. So I think what Chazal is teaching us over here is David HaMelech had to figure out how to repair those other relationships. So I will say that again, that sometimes there are things that happen in a marriage that cause irreparable damage, and other times there are things in the marriage that happen that cause a tremendous rift. And it's upon the perpetrator of the negative act to try to go ahead and repair that rift, and to do what they can to mend that and to put that back together. So David HaMelech understands, I did a lot of damage, not just to Bathsheba, not just to Yechidi, but to all of my wives. to all of my wives. And so Chazal telling us that David HaMelech undertook it upon himself to try to fix that which he broke. Incredible. Bikesh David Lavod Avodah Zarah. Both say, this is wild. This is wild. In the aftermath of the sin of Bathsheba, David HaMelech wanted to worship idolatry. Whoa. What does this mean? Shneimar, Vahi David ba ad harosh, asher ishtachav Hashem leElohim, ve'ein rosh el avodah zarah. Shneimar, but v'hu salma reisha di dov tov v'nei likraso chushaya arki karo kutanto v'adama al rosho. So again, David is about to worship idolatry. We'll see why in just a moment. Who meets him? A man by the name of Chusha Arki. Chusha Arki, again, his clothing is torn. There's dirt on his head. Amar lo David, Yomru melech shekamos chayavod avodah zarah. So Chusha says, David, what are you doing? They're going to say, a king like you, David HaMelech, worships idolatry. We'll say, get ready for this. Amar lo, melech shekamosi yahargenu beno, mutav yavod avodah zarah v'ayischalo shem shem fresa. Okay, so we'll say, now we're jumping. Part of the fallout, part of the punishment for the sin of Bathsheba is Hashem told David, there's going to be a rebellion in your home. That was the rebellion of Avshalom. Avshalom was a result of the episode with Bathsheba. So now David refuses to do anything to Avshalom. He's not going to injure, he's not going to kill Avshalom. So David thinks he's going to lose the rebellion. David feels that if he loses the rebellion, there's going to be a tremendous chil Hashem. And people will have questions on Hashem. How could it be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed David to lose this battle against Avshalom? So listen to David's cheshbon. David says, you know what? I'm going to worship idolatry. People then say I'm an idolater. And then when I lose the battle against Avshalom, people will understand and say, oh, because he switched teams, went to idolatry. David HaMelech was concerned about the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was concerned that if he lost to Avshalom, it would make a chil Hashem. So instead, he decides, let me worship idolatry, become an idolater, and then people will attribute my loss to the fact that I switched over to idolatry. And therefore, again, the sanctity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be preserved. Overwhelming. We'll say, Allah for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, willingness like to take it for the team in such a dramatic way. Amarle, so the Gemara says, listen to this. So Amar, my time kind of sibas yifastar. So we'll say this is incredible. So Avshalom's mother was a woman by the name of Ma'acha. Ma'acha was a princess who David HaMelech, a Gentile princess who David HaMelech took as a yifas to a war bride. So Hushai Arki says to David, why did you marry a yifas toar? So Amrle, yifas toar achwana shaye. Yifas toar is permitted. Amrle, lo darashta smuchin. Did you not darshan the juxtaposition of the sugim right after Yifas Torah? What does the Torah talk about? What does Torah talk about? Parshas Kiseitze. T'samichle kia leish ben sorer umora. Kalanose Yifas Torah yesh lo ben sorer umora. Yeah, you're allowed to. But what comes right after the Yifas Torah section? Ben sorer umora. Now, both say. I want to tell you. This seems to be like one of these conversations that's like rubbing salt in a wound. Like, I don't know exactly what the purpose of this was, right? This happened a couple of decades earlier. But I was like, Husha Arki saying to David, by the way, why did you marry Macha to begin with? Right? Almost as if that has any bearing on the story. Okay, in any event, Husha Arki saves David from worshipping idolatry, but this was just understand, it might be the one time in history that someone was ready to worship idolatry out of immense love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. David thought that if he lost to Avshalom as David Melech Yisrael, that would have been Chil Hashem. David Melech was willing to give everything away for the sake of preserving the honor and dignity of the Ribbon Shalom. Overwhelming. Let's go weiter. Lamad David Dome. So we'll say this is incredible. What could David Melech be compared to? So the Gemara says, L'socher kusi. He could be compared to a kusi merchant. Now we'll say, Rashi points out over here that the way kusi merchants work like this, they never sold in bulk. They only sold in small measures. Why? Because their cheshbon was like this. If you sell in small measures, you have to buy more often, and they could increase the price a little bit each time. So they make more money by selling in small measures. That was David HaMelech. So how so? Amar David Shkios mi'avin. We'll say we're going to see the way it worked was like this. David HaMelech asks for forgiveness, but he asks for forgiveness like in intervals, like a little bit at a time. So the first thing he says, Chosh Baruch Hu, Shkios miyavin. So first thing Melech asks for forgiveness for are his accidental averos. Chosh Baruch Hu, people make mistakes. Hashem says, forgiven. Next, Uministaros nakeni. Chosh Baruch Hu, cleanse me from the intentional sins but no one knows about. Hashem says, fine. Shvigilach, forgiven. Gamizedim chashoch avdecha. Forgive me for my intentional sins. Shvigilach, okay, forgiven. Al yimshulu bi as esam to lo l'shto be'rabanan, lo l'shto be'rabanan. So ultimately, again, Hakadosh Baruch Hu make it that the rabbis don't focus ultimately again on my sin. Shvigilach, forgiven. V'nikesi pesharav. So Hakadosh Baruch Hu, one last request. Shalo yichtov sirchuni. Can you please take out the story of Bathsheba from Navi? Can you just strike it from the record? So I will say, Amar lo, Efshar. Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, that far I can't do. Why? We'll stop over here for today. I'll say, okay. I'll say, tremendous story ahead of us, tremendous Gemara ahead of us tomorrow. Listen, I just want to point out, just it's important to understand. We did do a blot of Gemara, right? I just want to point out, we did do a blot. Okay, granted, half of it was yesterday's daf. Again, it's okay, because the last daf, the last amud of Sanhedrin is only one side. Only one side. So that's going to be our catch up there, we'll say. Tremendous. Until we get there. Yeah, I know. All right, Chavra Zoom, have a great day, everyone.
A lot of these like happening so good, like you're gonna like, so you have Kasanon and
that's the only problem with the size and the pace is either do the psukim or the Gemara does not, which is a shame because so many of these psukim are psukim that we see. Yeah, I don't know. What? What's entrapment? It's Bathsheba? No.
Earlier about him being made fun of in the basement.